The You Can Say That Here podcast would like to thank our sponsor, Employment Tutors. Employment Tutors is your go-to destination when you want to get promoted, become a better leader, or set yourself up for success after college. You can visit employmenttutors.com or receive free access to a live small group coaching session by emailing coach at employmenttutors.com and putting "You Can Say That Here" in the subject line. You can say that here.
All right. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
We have a special
Good morning.
guest with us, Chris Kluckas. Thank you for joining us, or thank you for allowing me to, I don't know, badger you into being our guest today. So, hey, I have to talk about Amber Heard and Johnny Depp. It kind of just like, how do you ignore what's going on here? Like, I hope this woman is as crazy as she sounded during that trial, because otherwise I'm really devastated about this outcome. Are you guys following this trial, or the trial that just ended?
Yeah, more than I wanted to, yeah.
It's kind of like a train wreck, right? You can't look
So-
away.
When you say the outcome, tell me, what were your thoughts on it?
You know, I'm really torn, and I'm really torn about the outcome, right? Because if he really abused her, and, you know, domestic violence, you know, like the worst thing that I would want to hear is that he really did just beat the snot out of her.
Mhm.
And here she goes out there and she's trying to do something good with this domestic violence campaign with the Washington Post or New York Times or whatever it was. And now, you know, she's in, you know, she gets sued. She did come across a little batshit crazy in the clips that I saw. So anyway, so he wins, right? This defamation suit. But I guess I'm just thinking, you know what? There's this storyline, this backstory
Mhm.
that they lost in the UK, right? This trial happened in the UK previously, and anything that happened in the UK case, they could not present in the United States case, I guess, because of double indemnity or whatever those laws are.
Mhm.
So they're you know, the argument is that she couldn't present all the evidence that Johnny Depp beat her. I don't know if that's true or not. Like, I watched Clippets. I was like, oh, you know what? Then there's this other piece. I'm like, man, sometimes, you know, like watching some of the women, like they're not always honest either. So who
Mhm.
knows? Like, they can attack them. And I've seen it happen where somebody has, recent true story. I have a client, an ex-client. They turned out to be completely without morals, the owner of this company. And I just watched him not pay people and do crazy stuff. So they had a member of their team. I don't want to give too much because I don't want anybody to know, but they had a member of their team that had this ironclad contract. So if that person was fired, that person received a year severance. So the only way they could get rid of that person without paying the year severance was if that person did something egregious. So they set up, the two best friends of the owner also work for the company. One of those people said that they were sexually assaulted by this person, and the person was fired. And I thought, well, my God, sue, right? So they get out of the contract. She claims sexual assault against this man. He loses his severance, loses his job like in a moment's notice. And here's the worst part is, you go to a lawyer, and if you go to a lawyer to try to fight it, it's kind of this Johnny Depp thing, right? the whole world knows about it. It becomes public record. If somebody Googles your name, all of a sudden, whether you did it or not, there is a sexual assault claim against you or record in your file. Chris is nodding his head. So like, even just saying, if I just said, hey, Andy assaulted me, and
pretty much what you say at the beginning of every single episode.
So but if Andy decides
you.
to sue me, right? If he decides to sue me, so good for Johnny Depp, right? If this was a false claim and he was, he was innocent, to go out there and put yourself out there in the public eye and say, no, it's not true. Look, even I'm not sure who's a good person or bad person. But so Andy now decides to sue me because of how I opened, before we hit record. I blamed him for all of this egregious behavior when we were younger. So, but
Colleen,
if he sued me for it,
you can take a shit on my pillow for $8 million. It's it's totally fine. $8 million. $8 million would be well worth it. I could get new sheets, a whole new bed for that matter.
Well, but your reputation is at stake, right?
I have $8 million. I don't care about my reputation anymore.
I think, a man especially cares about their reputation, especially. Well, remember we talked about Will Smith slapping Chris Rock and him looking weak, and, a man never wants to look weak like that. To your point though, Colleen, everyone was on Johnny Depp's side from day one. And as a woman, I didn't know what the truth was either way. Looking at it subjectively, let's say, she did look batshit crazy. She did look like, that he was the right and she was in the wrong. At the end of the day, I feel the same way. I just don't know. And I just hope that it was done fairly.
Don't you think all these things have a short shelf life? And then everybody forgives and, Will Smith is whatever. I mean, when we're talking about is what's important, everybody was talking about Will Smith. Nobody was talking about Chris Rock and how he handled himself. And it's, Will Smith probably has his demons or a lot of things that are going on. And if you look at if you look at Chris Rock, it shows, what he was holding so much back, but he could have went so many places with that. He could have just said, something to the extent of if the street kicked in, or he would have said something like, you're slapping me because your wife's sleeping around, but you can't sleep him around or whatever. But he didn't do that. And he took the high roads. And I think in society, everybody's not, they're just looking for the instant gratification. Is he right or wrong? So that's, I guess, part of the problem. It's like, I don't know. I don't want to get caught up in Johnny Depp and Amber. I mean, she is probably batshit crazy. And
but aren't you a trained psychologist? I think we just got his.
But I'm a realist. It's just like when everybody always talks about social media, I'm just like, why don't you worry about your life? Who gives a crap? Listen. Every time somebody would send me a clip of it, it was pretty funny. There was one scene where Johnny Depp was reading his text to Amber, or somebody's reading the text to Amber, and the lawyer goes, "Did I quote that right?" And he goes, "It's something to the extent of the quote was, hope you die in hell, you bitch," or something like that." And he's like, so the lawyers, "Did I read that correctly?" And Johnny Depp is like, "Yes, you did." And it was just. I
saw that was funny.
Yeah. You know what it is? It's like the new OJ. It's the new OJ thing. It takes us away from reality, which is sad. I mean,
yes.
That's why I'm not on social media until now.
For me, though, social media can be like a fishing pole. Like as a minister, over the years, it didn't happen immediately, but over the years, just little things to inspire or encourage, and it actually worked for me. So I think it can be used for good and evil. And even we were talking earlier on another episode, whenever you put yourself out there, no matter what you say, expect haters to come out. If it's nice, you're going to get it. If it's not nice, you're going to get it. So social media is brutal.
Well, I think your point, Chris, is until the next thing happens.
Yes.
Yeah. Right.
Yes.
So
And the other
welcome to
thing
you
too
can
is
say
if,
that here.
I'm sorry. The other thing too is if you're getting encouragement from that, or you're willing to listen to the critics and the people that are giving you praise, why that's not a really a sense of reality too, because you have so many quote unquote followers.
True.
I think
Yes.
Elon Musk really it shows you how quickly, like,
Wait, Chris, before you continue, I have a
boy.
big crush on Elon Musk.
he's
Go ahead.
Listen,
Continue.
that's
just
great.
saying.
but when he was showing all of the fake followers, when he's buying Twitter, and all these people have fake followers, and that's one.
Yeah,
and it's
Twitter's
like
Twitter's like 90% bots.
Yeah, and it's you know what it is? It's a movie set. It's a movie set.
Wow.
It looks like a real wall, but it's really a fake wall, and that's I kind of see a lot of people that way.
We've called it fake book on here, like for example, Facebook could be fake book, for a lot of people, but I understand what you're saying. My concern was, as a female, if she didn't receive a fair trial, that bothered me. If he indeed was guilty and it didn't come out that way, like I think that's what you were saying originally, Colleen.
Wasn't a trial though. It wasn't a trial. It was a civil dispute, and
nevertheless, it was on trial for the world.
Yeah, but the standard of proof is much lower in a civil trial, and defamation is subjective. So it's really just up to the jury to decide: did defamation happen? And maybe I'm crazy, but I don't recall him. I think him beating her was part, like, she said he beat her, but there was no evidence that he did. And it seemed like that was part of the problem that started the whole thing. She said, I'm going to screw you over. Who are they going to believe? They're going to believe me. If I go and tell them that you beat me, they're going to believe me.
My husband said something pretty, like, I laugh about it every time he says it. He's like, listen, this is just how people live. We're watching this spectacle, but people thrive on this chaos and thrive on these manic relationships. Like, they were bought into that for 6 years. It takes 2, right?
Your boy Elon's wrapped up in this whole thing, right?
That
saw
was great.
That.
Yeah, apparently there's a rumor from people who might know or should know that he paid her. He paid the ACLU, like, she owed the ACLU $1 million for drafting some case for her, and she couldn't pay it because she's broke as shit. And someone paid it for her. Let's put it that way. Someone who was possibly trying to bang her while she was still with Johnny Depp. And there was a whole back and forth there with Elon. Like, he was trying to bang her. That's what appears to be obvious.
Colleen, you gotta raise
charisma.
First Harry Styles, now Elon Musk. What are we gonna do with you?
Wait till I talk about David Banda.
Hey,
who the hell that is?
That's Madonna's son. He's 16. Do you see they went to this show? No, I'm not in love with him, but I'm like, no, not like that.
Allie, I may convert just so I can pray for Colleen.
You guys are sick. I'm
We're sick.
I'm just saying, I am fascinated by individuals on this earth. They're like, I fall in love, not literally. I'm not stalking them. I only stalk Chris's wife. That's the only person I've ever stalked.
Well, let's hear about what Chris's background is and the work that you do.
Okay, so I've been
wait. I'm sorry to interrupt, Chris. Before you start, I have to ask you the most important question of the day. Have you been on any other podcasts?
No, never.
Virgin. We are the first ones to get a piece of you. So when you
I'm old enough so Colleen won't go after me.
But when
oh, he's quick. He's
good.
Quick. We gotta watch this one. He's good.
So all right. So my background is I'm working in Patterson. I'm working for a company. I'm a director of an outpatient clinic, mental health, substance abuse treatment. I've been there over 20 years. I'm also working out of Metuchen, doing similar things. I run a lot of groups, a lot of interactive groups. We have interesting clientele. So it's probation, parole, Department of Children's and Families. And throughout the years, I've had a lot of contact with a lot of clients. You know, I've worked with grandparents to grandkids. And, you know, we're not the largest program in town, but we're the most steady. You know, there's you know, about 5 different programs. I would say the 5 families, if you will, but they've all gone through their ups and downs. So have we. But we see a lot of I see a lot of gang stuff, violence, and drugs, and all of the other stuff. So I love it. I wouldn't leave the job just for anything. It's not just, you know, it's not always about pay. I mean, obviously pay is part of it, but I've seen some of the other agencies in my time that they say they're doing good work, and you know how messed up they are, you know. So it's kind of nice. But I mean, I love what I do, and I have a very close relationship with a lot of clients. You know, I've known them for years, members, or you know, just people just trying to get by, you know. So
You know,
I enjoy it.
I'm just gonna mention this, Chris, because one thing I don't, and I'm not gonna be shocked if it happens this morning, but every single time we've ever been together, which is many over the last 4 years, right? Or golfed or whatever, phone calls, he gets a call from a client and he drops everything. And it's just amazing. And it's all times of day, all times nights, weekends. Like, it is, you are always there for your clients. And I know that, you know, some of their lifestyles are really challenging. And the fact that you will drop everything for these this community just blows my mind. To give you an idea of where Patterson is, I want you to tell this. If you guys look on Twitter, I posted a picture Chris sent me because I had never, ever seen anything like this. And it's a picture of a traffic signal. So do you want to talk about that picture? It's amazing.
All right. So one of the things is they have in traffic lights, they have these 2 cones that sit above. They're almost like, you know, the old discs that you put on the satellite dishes that you put on your house. They're a little smaller, but they're facing different directions. So they can determine, the police in the community can determine where shots come from. So that's kind of the stuff that, you know, they're talking, you know, they don't always talk about in their community, but it's a reality, if you will, you know. So
I can't even imagine thinking that I need to put these on traffic signals, right? Where did the gunshots come from tonight? That blows my mind.
I'm more interested in why there's so many, like, Chris, why do you think there's so much violence? Because I've heard a whole bunch of different theories about why. Well, I mean, that's kind of a cart before the horse question, but can you say a little bit more? Because Colleen knows, but I don't know. I don't think Allie knows. A little bit more about, like, what services you offer. I know obviously you talk to clients, and when you say clients, you mean families or individuals who you have a counseling relationship with. But are there the organization? What other kind of work do you do? Do you have social work component? Do you have, you know,
we have social work. We have a care management program. Oftentimes is a lot of systems that are designed to help people. Let's say let's say your Medicaid, your IDs, and things of that nature. There's some things in the community, and sometimes they make it a little bit harder for these people. I look at it this way: is one of the things that we do that we're very good at is the old theory is, you know, give a man a fish, feed him for a day. Teach a man a fish, you feed him for a lifetime. Well, sometimes you have to offer a man a fish to get him to the table to take part in the discussion. That's one of the things that we do. For us, it's really important. We had a client. What was it? It was Tuesday. She came in, or she had an assessment on Tuesday, and she didn't want to go to inpatient.
How
and
do they
she
get
had a lot.
referred, Chris? How do they get referred to your agency?
Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, they get referred by parole, by DIFAS,
Okay.
Department of Children and Families. Some just come on their own. They call up. They're homeless. They get calls a number of different ways. Being in the community for a long time, somebody will send somebody in, and they said, we'll say is, my uncle so and so told me to talk to you. I need help. Okay, explain to me what's going on, and it's just you kind of have the conversation with them. So we are predominantly in Metuchen, or excuse me, in Patterson. We're dealing with a Medicaid population. So it could a lot of clients that are on probation, drug court, PTI, pretrial intervention, parole, and then just other people with substance abuse for aftercare. So we work with all of them, and we try to kind of help them not only with substance use, but also other aspects of their life, getting them their Medicaid, kind of somewhat stabilizing housing and things of that nature.
So there's a strong social work component to it too.
Yeah. And we do, what it is? I think that the thing that we're very good at is we do a lot of kind of motivational interviewing and motivation, a pat on the back, kick in the pants.
Yeah.
And sometimes, yeah. And to me, it's really important because you really need to say to a client, I had, I was starting to tell a story is we had a client that came in and she had a lot of substances in her system. She needed to go to inpatient. She said, I can't go. I can only go for 7 days or detox and treatment or something of that nature. Or it wasn't even 7 days. I think it was 3. And I said to her, okay, we can help you get there, but I don't think that's the proper level of care. And then she was going back and forth. And I said, we had a discussion about the different levels of care. And I said, give us a call tomorrow. And I had a new staff member that just started, and he's like, I have to put something in the system. I said, put in the system that we're discussing. We're in the process of engaging her into higher level of care. This often happens. Somebody will say well, I want to come to outpatient treatment. And if they're all hopped up on drugs and there's a lot of fentanyl around you, we're dealing with a lot of that. That's fine. I know you want to do that, but I'm not willing to take you because, there's a responsibility. There's a theory,
So what's the correct intervention for someone who's actively using fentanyl, say, or heroin?
Stop.
From the state perspective, what should the town government, the police, the state, whoever, what do you think should be done for folks who are actively using and
Wait, are you asking him from a state perspective or his
No,
opinion?
I just want to know his opinion because I think people who are participating in open drug use aren't ready for a program like Chris's. This is my opinion, right? And this is why I want to know what you believe, what you've seen with your own eyes, because I'm completely out of touch, have no idea. But from an outsider's perspective, it seems to me that someone who's literally breaking the law, doing drugs, maybe the correct intervention is to arrest them. That's what they used to do, and get them in the system.
Yeah.
Because leaving them on the street to continue to do drugs is not a kindness.
True. You want to get the least harm. The call, Colleen, you mentioned the call that I got the other night. I had a client that had been up from Florida, and he was in an inpatient program where he was living in. And kind of to answer your question, Andy, I'll give you a quick scenario of what happens. A lot of the systems broke.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to go to help at a place. And one of the problems is sometimes the people there, it's about ego. It's not about helping. It's about numbers. It's not helping. Mm-hmm. So the client had been up from Florida. He had been at a methadone clinic. He came off of the methadone, and he was starting his aftercare program. And he has a decent job, And the thing is with the job is he, so he's working in New York and he's doing all of these things. The program that he was residing in, they said to him is, okay, so since you're off the methadone, now you need to come to our outpatient program. And from our outpatient program, you're going to see our doctor. And he just wanted to talk to them about it and say is, I'm engaged in treatment. He was with us. And he said is, I have a connection with them and I want to, continue there because I'm only going to be here for another month or two. Now, I guess the program's policy, one of the things they do is, since you're in their inpatient program, you have to go to their outpatient program. And they're billing for the inpatient, they're billing for the outpatient, they're billing for your medication. And even if it's not good service, you guys remember anybody ever read the Steve Jobs book, where he was talking about how successful Apple was because they all worked together compared to, let's say, Sony. Sony did the electronics, Sony did the music. They should have originally had the original iPhone and things of that nature.
Right.
They didn't work together. And it became, excuse my language, a clusterfuck.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes a lot of programs, they have good intentions, but it's also harming the client. So the client wanted to talk about, he wanted to just talk about treatment and say, I'm planning on leaving my inpatient, my program because I'm waiting to save up money. I got a car and I'm going to be moving out. The director of the program said, didn't even talk to him. And they did a search on his room without him being there. And they found contraband. They said, you have 10 days to leave. And he was saying to me, this is effed up. And he reached out to a couple of different people within the community that I know. And he said that, that they said to me and to him is like, I've heard about this with them. That's one of the things. So in a sense is, I guess, getting back to your question, Andy, what's to be done? It's not.
So we're gonna fix the world here today. So what's the the first step? So if I'm on the street and I'm actively using, and I basically have given up on everything, and all I want, I'm living from, I'm using, I pass out, I wake up, I try to find another hit, and then just keep going through the cycle. Right. How does it start? And like, describe what, I mean, I agree. I hear what you're saying. The system is super complex and so many parts of it are broken, but where does it start? Like, what is it? Should it be one agency that does this? Should it be multiple pronged approach like Apple, where everybody works together? I mean, maybe it does,
but let me ask you this, Andy. It is it's an extremely broad question, but let me ask you this, Andy. Do you think the world wants to be fixed? Or everybody wants the world to have the same view as they do, whether
that's a whole nother show.
Well, you look at it as, you're one of your boy crushes, Elon Musk, if he posts something, not too long ago. He says, I'm never going to vote Democratic again. And then somebody said okay, now get ready for the barrage. So that everybody started going after him. And I forget the term. I'll think of it in a second, but it's a bias against someone's opinion, no matter what it is. I don't think everybody wants to work together, but go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say, if I can just share personally for a moment, maybe on a different level, but if you'd like to finish, I apologize.
Go ahead.
Did you have anything? Did you want to say?
No, go ahead.
So for example,
trust me, I have more to say, but
as a minister, as working as a minister, and unfortunately having, you would say dual diagnosis, mental health issues, substance abuse. So I'm no stranger to this with my family and the work that I've done in the field. Just to share with you, Andy, what I've seen, maybe just from my perspective, Chris, since I'm not in the field. Mental health, cancer is easier to navigate than mental health. With my experiences, people were, if they were engaged in a mental health episode or if it were a drug episode, most of them have Narcan on hand. The hospitals actually gave them Narcan. So the boyfriend would overdose, the girlfriend would Narcan them, then the next one would get high and they'd Narcan them. And the hospitals were doing this so that they didn't have to come back in. This is in Waterbury, Connecticut. I'm dealing with fugitive recovery agents, cops, then the mental health system. So then they get put on a psych hold for 24 hours. They look for a bed, can't find a bed anywhere in Connecticut. And these are not only teenagers, but adults. And again, we're dealing with not only substance abuse, but mental health, which go hand in hand. So then they finally find a bed for this person, and not necessarily the best facility. So think about, if this is your teen, now they're being put in a facility. You can't, anybody could walk into the room at any time. I'm just being honest, Chris, like the fear that could come over a parent when you have a little girl put into a place, everything is taken from them. They can't have elastics that have metal on them. If they have shorts with strings, they're taken out. And then after they're there for whatever it is, a week or 2 weeks, let's just say, now if you're over 18, you could walk out at any time. And even if you are placed for 3 days, what good did that do? But then once they're taken out, they'll go to an outpatient, IOP, PHP, maybe MDFT. I'm saying these acronyms, which people, you know, in the home, but it's a mess to navigate. Healthcare is difficult to navigate, even if I go in with a bellyache, let alone drug addiction and mental health. So I saw a Time magazine article a couple of years ago. It was like the biggest article they ever printed, what a crisis we have in the United States over mental health care. It's just a mess. It's heart-wrenching. And you're right. People aren't doing, I know there are people whose hearts are in it. There are people whose hearts are desensitized and they feel like their hands are tied. But we have a real problem. We have a real problem in the United States with this, and it should be better, and it's not.
Chris,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Chris, when we were talking, you had called this moral malnutrition.
Yeah.
And I love that. It really kind of resonated with me. I'd love for you to talk about that.
Can I summarize up to this point, because that's where we wanted to get to. But I think to summarize, we have a huge problem. The treatment of said problem is all over the place, but in some case, to me, it sounds like we're shoveling shit against the tide, because until you close the spigot that's putting people into this state, until you slow it down, the people coming into it, it's going to keep snowballing and getting worse and worse and worse. And we've seen that in our lifetimes. We've seen it reach a greater and greater crisis over time. So, Colleen, I think it's a good segue into to the root cause. Let's talk about that piece of it.
Chris was talking the other day about, New Jersey is a sanctuary, and so is Connecticut, right?
What does that mean?
And so immigrants can come in, illegal immigrants can come in, and they're safe. It's a sanctuary city. So unfortunately, like in New Jersey, when we're only making this problem worse. Chris, you're probably better to talk about this, but I thought your point was so great. You were saying, okay, we're a sanctuary city. Where do you think all these non-legal aliens go? They go to Patterson, where there's already no money. They're already stretched thin. Like, why aren't they coming to Chatham, New Jersey?
Yeah, there's
right?
No opportunities in Patterson. So what are they going to do?
Well, the system is already stretched so thin. If we're going to house immigrants, right, we're going to give them a safe place to go. Why don't we put them in Chatham High School? Has the #1 school in all of New Jersey, right? Why don't we give them a fighting opportunity in a community that has the money to manage and absorb some of the challenges, instead of putting them into a community that's already stretched and doesn't have the resources? And we're only, to your point, Andy, the root cause here is they're already thin. They're already trying to like shovel their shit against the tide. We're
But
making it harder to do that, I think.
but aren't there so many root causes, Chris? It could be trauma, it could be your childhood, it could be a genetic component, I mean, there's so many root causes.
Certainly. And getting back to, the point is, helping other people, there's nothing wrong with that, but we're not even helping people at our own table,
Mhm.
and my thing is let's say within Patterson is I don't mind helping somebody. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you're bringing more people to the table and you're not even feeding the ones that are there, that's, what kind of this destruction of the community that I see is just like, you're not helping the school system out. You're in a sense burdening it again. And I'm not saying don't help those people. There's nothing wrong with that. But and this is kind of what Colleen and I were saying the other night is, you're talking about feeding somebody or helping somebody else out, and somebody says, and if I say is, yeah, I think that we need to stop that, and someone says is, well, you're a bastard, or because I say that, well, I say you're a bastard too, because you want me to step over somebody or two people that are right next to me. It's like
customer service, right? You got somebody standing in front of you at the cash register, and then you take a phone call.
Right. Well, the other thing, you know what? It's somebody within the community. A lot of times I've taken my kids to work, childcare things going on, leave them at work. But every time I come off the exit, I point to the guys under the bridge, and I say, is take a look at that. Those are people, and I even know those people, understand that. But now you're now, in a sense, our government is sending people out onto the streets, or bringing people into the state and things of that nature, and you're not even helping those people that are homeless or have substance issues and things of that nature, and you bring other people into the country. I mean, to me, from my point of view, is that's just sick. That's in a sense is moral malnutrition. It's just like you're doing something to make yourself feel good, but you're not even taking part in it. You have a nice house now, so you can't worry about everybody else.
So I think it's
that's terrible.
I think it's Columbus, Ohio. If an immigrant goes to Columbus, Ohio, they have a very organized structure where they give that family, I believe it's $55,000 and up to $110,000. So the government writes them a check and says, okay, this is what you have. Now you have to go make yourself a worthwhile member of the community. And it sounds like a whole lot of money, right? To give them. And you look at some of these communities that that are growing right now there, and there's these beautiful homes and they're driving Mercedes, but they're, I don't know if they're onto something, but they're integrating into society and finding jobs and co-housing, and they're figuring out how to live and start careers and integrate into that community far more effectively. I don't know if that is the right way to do it, but it just seems like it's a different way than to do it.
Yeah, and Chris, it sounds like you've got this influx of poor and needy individuals into an area that already has a taxed social safety net, right? So the social net in Patterson has already got more people than you can actually help. Realistically, right. More people than you can help, and they're just piling more people on. And you mentioned the government, so I'm happy about that, because obviously government plays a big role. Are they sending them to Patterson because there's already an existing social safety net in Patterson, so they'll just take on more people?
No, they're not just sending them to Patterson. They're bringing them to New Jersey. It's okay to we're not going to send you out, if you will. So New Jersey is a sanctuary state. So, but they tend to end up in the inner cities and places of that nature, and the government's idea of helping, oftentimes it doesn't take reality into effect. And I'll give you a perfect example. During COVID, our governor let, shortened people's sentences. At one point, there were more, I think, guards in the jail than there were clients, and he shortened some people's stay in jail. Now, having said that, he let out quote unquote nonviolent offenders. Now, not making a discussion on that is, I had a gang member come up to me and she said because they came out on a Thursday. She said, get ready. There's going to be a lot of stuff going down this weekend. Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, there were a lot of shootings. And I said this to somebody and they said to me, I thought they were nonviolent offenders. And I said to them, is your idea of nonviolent and my idea of nonviolent is much different than the governor's. And reality hits, whether he knew it or not, reality hits is there were a lot of people that came back to get their territories, whether they're gang members, and you didn't take care of my family and I'm taking my stuff back. There were a lot of shootings and it happens a lot, and that's just the reality. Something sounds good, but it's not.
So when we talk about moral malnutrition, like back in the old days, the churches were a big part of this. It was community, belonging. The community rose around people who are struggling. We look at the Great Depression as one of the most beautiful examples of how communities work together to help each other out. Is there a community element that we're missing here, or is it kind of walk us through moral malnutrition?
Well, let's look at it this way. Some of the foundations of religion they have their issues. Sometimes an organization gets too big, whatever it is, and they lose sight of things, and then they cover it up. For example, I was baptized at a church. Our kids were baptized at a church. Our son, one of our sons, the priest that baptized him, moved from church to church to church and is now in jail. So are you handling the issue in a sense, which really ticked me off about the church? And are you handling the issue or are you just covering it up? That's BS, And having said that is, the church certainly has a good foundation. And actually, my wife invited one of the priests over, and he's a really good guy. Actually, which point I think you guys will find this funny. I didn't realize it. I'm like, she invited our priest over. Why is Father John coming over? And my buddy said to me, he goes, it's probably an intervention because you're an asshole. But that's just the way it is. But he's somebody that Father John is somebody that is a good person. And one of the things is that he said after this other priest went to jail, he said we should have known about that. And I think that that's really important rather than covering it up.
Somebody did know about it. Somebody did know about it.
100%. And that's the problem. That's the moral malnutrition. You're not helping. You're not helping. You become part of the problem.
We were talking about those 5 cops that were caught taking money recently, and they, 5 of them were splitting up all of the money that they were taking from houses and busts and whatever, and only reporting a small percentage, but only one of them goes to jail.
That was the sergeant, I guess, right. The sergeant, lieutenant in charge, and that's part of the problem. I mean, and having said that, we've had police come in, I dialed 911, and I've never had an issue with that because I try to give them as much information as possible. And, I remember one time specifically, a woman cop and another cop stayed with a client of mine because they didn't want to go to the hospital until their child was taken care of, because she didn't want to put the child back in. She wanted a family member. They didn't want to put her back in the system. And they stayed with her. And if, they forced the issue, it would have blown up, if you will. And I wrote, a recommendation for to the I guess the chief of police about how well they've done. It happens a lot. There are a lot of good cops, and
sure.
You just can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. No. And there's obviously a lot of good truths, and there's some good priests. Listen, certain times a lot of times you'd say is, I don't mind donating to the church. I just don't want it to go to someone's defense fund about molesting a kid.
You can't tease them
That's
apart from me
wrong.
anymore. Yeah, I mean, and not that we're going to digress into a discussion of the Catholic Church, but for me, Chris, I can't tease those two things apart. I can no longer, participate in the church, because the Catholic Church has not acted in good faith, and it's a corrupt organization that needs to be disbanded.
I think they've done a lot of work to change that, and Pope
let's hope
Francis
so.
kind of has stepped in and said, okay, this is something that has to change going forward. And there's been a lot of work and effort doing it. But, as you're talking, Chris, but when he was coming on this podcast, we're like, okay, do we change his name and his voice? And how can he speak? Like, what does this mean? Because in essence, you are kind of like a priest, right? You have that same, right?
Actually, Colleen, truthfully, you're more like a priest than the rest of us.
Yeah,
because, you're penchant for young boys.
Oh, Andy.
Oh, this is not going away. We will talk about David.
How did that go? Didn't go the way you thought it did. Didn't go the way you thought it would, did it, Colleen?
But if I can just say from a non-Catholic perspective, I went into Niantic with the women, and I've been in many prisons, and I just want to share with you that sounded really good, didn't
There's
it?
the soundbite, Colleen. That's the soundbite you wanted.
Yes.
Do you want to know when I first became a minister, and they said, do you want to work in the prisons? And I said, well, am I equipped? Have I learned enough? Do I know what to do? And he said to me, goes, can you run? And I was like, I could run. He's like, you just have to be able to run if you need to run. I'm like, this is chubby little blonde over here. But what I wanted to share with you is that two things. We go into the prisons, whether it's the men or the women's, and we have these groups, and they have service, let's say, and we just talk about God, whatever. Many of them, 9 out of 10, leave God at the door when they leave, and many of them become incarcerated again because the programs that are available, let's say in Connecticut, aren't working. They go right back to where they got in trouble. They get in trouble again. So that would also speak to the systems that we have in place so that people aren't reincarcerated.
Wait, I need to ask this question. I need to understand this. So when they're spiritual while they're incarcerated.
In church, they're like, I love Jesus, praise Jesus, I'm healed, I'm ready, I'm good, I'm getting back out, I'm not going to be with the same people, I'm not going to do the same things. They get out, they go right back to the same place. They either, do the same crime or a different crime, get back on drugs again. And not all, but I'm like I said, 9 times out of 10, and it's heart-wrenching. And then they end up back in the same situation, if not worse.
When you said they leave God at the door, though, it's not that they leave the religion, but they just kind of forget their morals. Like they just step right back. It's one of the hardest things to do.
Because morals aren't derived from God, Colleen. Morals aren't derived from God. And your morals these people they're reoffending because they're reoffending because there's nothing else for them to do. It's almost inevitable. Yeah,
they're put back into poverty usually, or around the same bad people that they were around before, and nothing's changed. They're just put right. That's why these programs for people who have been incarcerated are amazing. They help them find a new place to live and a job so that they don't reoffend.
Yeah, I guess I was just clarifying that. Did they stop being religious because they left? I think what we're saying is they're that's not really what it is, right? They're just going back into the same situation, and they're further from the morality.
Changed. They haven't found meaning. Well, they haven't found their purpose.
Maybe they in prison it's easier to have God, because you're not on the street and you're not back paying bills, and you know what I'm saying?
It also helps you get parole.
So, to your point about when you were talking about priests and, the moral, or rather, am I saying it wrong? Moral malnutrition.
Malnutrition.
Yes.
Yeah. I believe everyone starts out with good intentions, but the road to hell is paved with good intentions.
Colleen asked the question about moral malnutrition, and you didn't really get a chance to go into it. Is this an idea that you're kicking around? Like, can you please tell us more?
No, it actually comes from an article written by I guess many years ago, and then Glenn Frey wrote a song, "I Got Mine," and in the song he says is, I can't think about everybody else now that I've got mine. I've moved from my former beliefs to now I'm in a penthouse, and I have I have to worry about myself, and I can't sell out, and probably, I'm not making a judgment. I'm just doing an observation. I didn't see even the whole thing. I know there's something coming up on the Black Lives Matter. They're talking, the idea and the foundation of Black Lives Matter. And what they were doing is they had a message, and they raised all this money, and they were trying to use it. And all of a sudden, is the founder now is living in this penthouse, or really has several different houses and armed security and things of that nature. And it's just like they're saying is where did the money go? And did it just go to you?
Fascinating. Did you see this
Well,
Candace Owen thing where she's knocking?
yeah,
She did that. She did this clip with the woman from, I can't remember her name, from the Black Lives Matter.
It wasn't Patrice Cullors, was it?
Yes, it was. Patrice Cullors has this Instagram. Oh, she's torturing me, blah, blah. She's outside. My family's at risk, all this stuff. Meanwhile, Candace Owen is videotaping her entire interaction outside the gate of this home that is registered to Black Lives Matter. It's like $1.5 million. And they have several, right? There's one that's $6 million, one, and they play the two videos together. It's unbelievable. But her question is like, here's all this money, and I think it's the same thing we had Eric Adams say. Here's all this money that was raised for a really good cause, and what are we doing besides awareness? What are we doing, Andy, to your point, to work at the root cause of the problem here?
Nothing.
Do we use it just to get rich? And that's kind of, all of a sudden you everybody start, a lot of people, let's say, go to Congress to get, to make changes, and then all of a sudden they get fat and comfortable, and you forgot where you lived, and you forgot what you've done, and you forgot everything you said. But wow, you're showing up at this ball, and you're on Instagram, and you're dressing really nice, and all the other stuff. It's just like that's not the intention, but it's all of a sudden it's corrupted us as human beings, and it's just and then we're immediately fighting against each other, and the term it's not like we're working together, and everybody has this. It's the term I was looking for before was viewpoint discrimination. I'm going to discriminate you now because of your viewpoint, because I have a different one, rather than sitting and talking. And I think that, Allie, what you're talking about, it's really important, is getting together in people within a group and being able to say things, and communicate. And you know what? One time, my wife, this is the only time I'm going to mention my wife, because I promised her I wouldn't talk about her. But she said something to me one time, and it was really an eye opener. We were having a discussion, and she said to me, "You're not listening to me. You're waiting to talk. Listen and kind of more listen and hear." And you know what? And I use that all the time. And she was exactly right. And I say that all the time to clients now.
I love that.
But that's it. But you think about this is, in a much broader sense, is how do you really sit and talk to somebody? Well, nobody's talking. I mean, how many conversations do people really have? And that's one of the things is that I, have a problem with, is just like people aren't listening, and they're just talking at you. And I said this to one of my clients. I'd been working with him for like 12 years, and he's bipolar and some other stuff, and he had some substance issues. And one of the things is he's been, since we started working together, he's been excellent, and he's successful in doing all this stuff. And I said to him, let's say his wife or his wife's family and his family have their own issues. And I said to him, I said, you're the healthiest one in your family. And he looked at me, and I said, you're the most stable. You talk about everything. You discuss it. You work it through. And I said, when the shit hits the fan, everybody comes to you to solve the problem. And he went home and said something to his wife. And next time I saw him, he said he said something to his wife, and she kind of dismissed him. And it pissed him off for about a month. And I said, we talked about that. Anyway, about a month later, a lot of stuff hit the fan, and he just waited, and he said, you still think Chris is wrong? Because everybody went to him to solve the problems. And he's saying is, and I'm the one with bipolar and all the other stuff, but everybody's, trying to make decisions and solve problems, but you're all coming to me. So he has something that works for him. And for us, it's better yet sitting down and having that discussion with somebody to, in the process of change is kind of to stabilize ourselves and take a larger view on things, And I think for so many people, that's important. We don't have that anymore. Everybody's on their phone. Everybody's texting. Everybody's posting things. When I go out to dinner with my buddy, if I'm on my phone, I'm showing him pictures or stupid things. But yeah, I don't want to spend time, texting other people. I try not to take calls for, unless it's important. It's just like the people in my life, I value that much more. That's helped me, with my relationships.
But isn't it so hard for people to find that right med at the right dosage and the right APRN to disperse that medicine, or the right psychiatrist, and they're not even taking patients. Everyone's on waiting lists. It's, I want to speak to the crisis. And so my heart goes out to people, that we need better health advocates or mental health advocates for these people, because there's so many Facebook groups and Instagram groups for parents and for, adults, and nobody knows what to do, where to go, unless you've been through the system, So if somebody listening in your area right now, is there a phone number or a website? Like where would they go?
Well, I understand there's so many things within the community and other places. And if something doesn't work, go somewhere else. Don't keep going. Like I say this about certain, like to recovery meetings. Why are you going to the same meeting? It's a dirty pond. So you send somebody to a meeting, and they know people at the meeting. They've had relationships with the people at the meetings. They might have sold drugs to the people. They might have bought drugs from the people. They're required to be there, so they're not getting anything out of the meeting. Go to a different meeting.
Right. Right.
And the high success rate for people with substance and recovery is people that have failed the most, because they keep coming back. And hopefully you're able to apply those things and get better and really learn from your mistakes. And that's one of the things is in life is, when they say is you fall down 7 times, get up 8 times. And maybe you learned what not to do. And that's so important for people. People don't understand that you're going to keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. When they talk about insanity, it's the same thing.
Can you share a success story?
Okay. So I think I was telling Colleen this. I had a client, this is years ago when marijuana wasn't legal, and he had a DIFUS case. And
what's that? I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. DIFUS, Department of Children and Family Services.
Okay.
And one of the things is he kept testing positive, and he'd go to court. He was fighting his child's mother. They had several kids together. One of the kids was a special needs child, and they were fighting and all this other stuff. And so the judge sent them both to a program. And she wouldn't go. She didn't test her and all this other stuff. Every time he'd go, or every time he tested with us, he tested positive for marijuana. And they'd go to court, and the judge would just yell at him. And he's like, I'm at least showing up to the program. She's not. And he said to me, he goes, I'm telling you, she's sleeping with this judge. So I had a heart to heart. I said, maybe he is, but you're still testing positive. And so we had once again, the motivational pat in the back, kick in the pants. I was like, he's not going to fucking listen to you if you keep testing positive for drugs. Stop fucking using. Anyway, so he actually stopped. And I said, okay, now we were talking about it. And I said, and I kept testing him and testing him and testing him. And all of a sudden the odds started going in his favor. And the judge started looking at her. And I said, then you go to court and you sit there with that smirk on your face and you let her disintegrate, if you will, and having to answer the question. So long story short is I've known him for years, and he got his kids back, and he just had a baby, was it last year? And he has sole custody of all his kids, and he's working in the school system. So, and one of the things is a couple of years ago, I had a brain bleed. So I was in the hospital.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah, that's a whole other story.
Scary.
I had a brain bleed. I was in the hospital. One of the first people to call me was him.
Wow.
Yeah. And he's like, what the hell? And you know, I'm all drugged out, but we had a good conversation. And he's just, you know, and one of the things is he's saying is, you know, for one of the things is I realized about myself is, you know, when you have to, you know, the questions, when you say everything happens for a reason, you have to figure out the reason. And my mom said that to me in the hospital. I was like, I was pissed off, and I had this conversation with my mom. I was like, I don't understand why this happened. And she said, everything happens for a reason. And I said to her, what's the reason? Well, I don't know. And I'm like, well, then don't tell me that, because I'm the one in this bed feeling like crap.
Right.
And so I was in the ICU and stepped down. And anyway, long story short is one of the things is that questions that I wrote, and Colleen and I were talking about this last week, is I said is, what's the reason? What did I learn about myself from this? And I went through the process of answering that. One of the things is doing what I do, I realized and I appreciate how much, you know, that the journey I went on with a lot of my clients, and I appreciated how much they go on, they're willing to sacrifice for that for me. So the things that I learned about myself is the people that I'm close to me, I'm that much closer to. And so for him, you know, we still text every now and then and all this other stuff. And it's, you know, I'm happy for him. I'm genuinely happy for him, and he's happy for me. And so it's a good thing, but it's just, you know, there's certain things I don't want to waste my time with, you know? So,
you learn,
you know, that's, yeah, you grow, and, you know, and you're open for discussion, you know, it's, what's wrong with that? That's it, you know? So it's, yeah, I have a lot of stories like that, you know, different people call me on my birthday, I call them, you know, it's nice.
I think you said something really interesting before, you know, people are waiting to speak and people aren't having the conversations and they're not communicating the way that they should to really solve problems. And it's one of the reasons that we're all together on this podcast, because some of the value that shows up every week is that we don't agree on everything. And Andy said something that has just so stuck with me since we started. He said, hate the idea, not the person. And when we share ideas and we can somehow, and Andy, I have to give him total props because he's really good at this, because he's always like, okay, what can we agree on? Where do we go? What do, you know, and he brings it together. And I love his questioning even today, because it's like, okay, now what do we do about this? How do we help? Like, you know, I love the Columbus model because we're starting them off right so they don't end up in the system.
If somebody's at zero, if somebody oh, look at that. Hey, hi, buddy.
Oh, a black lab.
Oh, that's Oscar.
Oscar. My dog is so lazy he hasn't gotten up off the floor. You know, I taught him well. You know, if somebody's at zero, it's very, very hard to get off zero.
But sometimes zero is just what they need, like that rock bottom sometimes. And I didn't want to get that's like for me, without, like, I didn't bring it up at all, but the whole faith component, you know, we have Teen Challenge in Connecticut, and I just lost Chris. So wait till Chris.
No, I'm here. I'm just
okay. No, because I don't know if
his
you
bully
want
stick.
Andy, I'm with you, because you and I are usually in agreement on crazy. The minister and the atheist are
on everything except Jesus's divinity. We agree.
Okay. So the rock bottom, the zero, sometimes, like, we have this program in Connecticut called Teen Challenge. And I think it has like an 84% success rate for teens who get off of drugs and alcohol. And they say it's because of the faith component. I don't know whether you agree or not, Chris, but, you know, as a faith person, I do believe that sometimes, Andy, you know, God lets us hit that rock bottom so that, you know, he can pull us up and But again, I still think it's a choice with God. I don't think it's just God's doing, we have to make that decision with him. So sometimes, I read something yesterday, like sometimes the problem is the solution, which sounds crazy.
It does.
And the only analogy I can think of at the moment is, say you're in a really bad marriage and the person leaves you, and now you're like, oh my God, he left me, but it was a bad marriage. And the problem isn't I'm getting divorced and where am I going to live and what kind of money am I going to have. I mean, it is a problem to you, but it was actually a solution, because now you're getting out of that. So the problem actually became the solution. Christy,
I'm going to disagree.
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. I mean, but you think about this is personal responsibility and accountability. You've got to take ownership of it,
Well,
and
right.
I've said to parents is, it might be the best place for your son to be is in jail. Because
Right.
he's not going to OD, and it gives you peace of mind, and they might need that,
Allie, I'm going to disagree on this zero, and maybe I'm kind of on Andy's with Andy a little bit, because I think it depends who you are and where you are at that zero.
No,
I think if you're
that's what Chris just said.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, listen, that's where some people take their life and some people don't. Let's just say that's zero, or they turn to the drug, or they don't, or the drink, or they don't, or whatever it is, the food. And I agree with you, but I do believe that sometimes, and all the testimonies I've heard from people who were on drugs or were, whatever it was, pornography addiction, you name it, when they hit their rock bottom. It is. Andy.
It's not a thing, Allie.
Andy, it is.
It's not.
It is, Andy. Men take a snapshot and women with
well,
their eyes.
There you go.
It stays all day long. Sorry. Yeah, I had to be, it's for pornography's for everybody. Okay.
Everybody, this always goes back to sex or poop, this show, every time.
We haven't come full circle yet.
But I do believe it's about who you are surrounded with. If you're at zero and you have the support of your community, your church, your people, your family, that's a different zero than someone's on the street and they're leaving a prison at zero, and all they know is what they knew before that got them there.
And I do believe that, but I also believe it, again, you could be all alone and have all the support in the world. Look at that father who lost their child in Newtown, and then he took his life after 10 years later. He had all the support in the world, but yet he couldn't get over it. I think it just depends on the person too, but you're right. I do agree. Support helps for sure.
But you know what it is? It sometimes is we deal with so many people that are so stubborn. So when we were running a partial care, when our program had a partial care program, we'd order lunch, and oftentimes is there's food left over. One of the owners and I, Joe, went downstairs, and it was cold, and I'd always bring food to people because I don't want to throw food out, right? And people on the streets. And one of the things is it was really cold one time, and Joe and I went down there and offered, gave the guy a sandwich, and I said we said to him, it was like a frost warning, so they're able to go into shelters, and we said to him is like, you shouldn't be, you want to get into the shelter, we can get you into the shelter, we'll make a call for you. And he says, no, I'm fine, I don't want to go there. How do you stop somebody from hurting themselves? You can't.
Well, that's one of the biggest problems in the city right now is the homeless don't want to be confined, right?
You know why they don't want to be confined? You know why they don't want to be confined?
Why?
Because they can't do drugs in the shelter.
Yep.
Well,
no, that's not true, because they can, but they don't always kick them out. They'll bring them back, or they go outside, and there's plenty of ODs in shelters now. But here's the thing is, my thing is this is, are you okay with that? Because first of all, I don't think people should be sleeping on the sidewalk and doing drugs on the sidewalk.
100% agree.
Because and you have what are you showing for the kids? That's not okay. It's not a safe environment for anybody, and that's part of it. There's a girl on the way out of town. They're always asking for change, and I saw her one time, and she said, I can't get into a shelter because I don't have an ID. So, I gave her some change. I gave her water, and I said, well, here's my card. Stop in. I'll try to help you get an ID to get into shelter. That was what, 4 months ago? She still hasn't come in. I see her all the time, and I'm like, stop in. I can't pull you out, and it wouldn't be. It's she's not going to come in until she's ready, but you still make the offer. Because I don't want to be one of those people that say screw you.
Yeah, no,
that's not who I feel I am.
Chris,
if someone's asking for help, you utilize it.
Are you familiar? Have you seen? Do you know who Michael Schellenberger is?
No, I think I've heard the name, but
so he recently wrote a book called San Francisco, and a lot of the stuff we're talking about today is, he takes a very, I won't call it exactly novel approach, but he has a pretty comprehensive approach to the open drug scene problem. The homeless issue. He's from California. He's currently running for governor. He has zero chance to win. But he's got some very good ideas. I don't necessarily agree with everything that he says, particularly because he also wrote a book about energy and nuclear power and climate. But this book, San Francisco, is really worth a read. It's his take on the situation is something you're not hearing politicians or most people talk about. He argues that the correct intervention for someone who's actively using drugs, particularly in public, breaking the law, is arrest them, get them in, get them processed, get them cleaned up so they can't kill themselves. At least it's much harder for them to kill themselves. He argues that housing, in a lot of places in San Francisco, especially, he sees it. They think, you give them housing first and then everything comes after that. But he does not subscribe to that theory. He's looking at like what they're doing in Europe, where housing is earned. So like what you're saying, personal responsibility. You get somebody in, you get them off of zero. Maybe you get them out of their physical addicted state at least. And everything follows from that. But if they don't want to help themselves, you literally can't help them. And what's burnout like in your organization or in your, I know what burnout's like in your field.
It's got to be brutal.
Yeah. Well, it's, you know what it is. And with us, it's, we don't have that, but, I've had times where I'm like, just very frustrated, but, one of the biggest problems is, I see it. And when I interview people for a job, one of the things is the idea of everybody gets a trophy is so damaging to people, especially when they're coming in the field. And all of these new counselors, social workers, and things of that nature is they've never had confrontation. They've never had to deal with confrontation. Now, how the hell do you confront somebody and address them on an issue when you've never been confronted? And these are serious issues. You know what I mean? So it's just like, I remember coming in or saying something to a colleague of mine. It says, like, please wipe that social worker look off your face, because they're gonna tear you up.
Right. Because
and that's
are liars and not to be mean. I'm saying
100%.
They're 10 steps ahead. They're manipulative. They lie. They know, so you're like a sheep going to the wolf.
Exactly. Yeah, and I always say this, that's a you problem, not a me problem.
I wonder if it'll have some ironic effect where these young, idealistic, weak-willed social workers will be going into the field thinking they're going to go do good, and they're so weak that maybe the addicts and the criminals will try to help them. Like, look, you're doing this all wrong, kid. and then find maybe the folks that are struggling will find meaning in helping these poor, clueless Zoomers, learn about the world and how the world really works.
If I just want to share a story about somebody I know who was in an outpatient facility. It was like 4 hours a day, 4 days a week. And this person began to go around to the other people in the facility and start counseling them. You know what I mean? And in fact, the people who ran the facility said, this kid's a boss bitch. This kid now is like taking over and telling everybody how to do it. And if she doesn't want to participate, nobody else is going to participate. So it's interesting that you say that. It's like the inmates running the prison kind of scenario. So it actually, it happens.
It is kind of interesting because when we work with leadership, we teach leaders that are coming up, like up and coming leaders, we teach them, or I teach them, to be strategic and find those strategic alliance. If they want to move a group, they want to move an organization, they're never going to help anybody unless they create those strategic alignments and bring everybody along with them. So it sounds like Boss Bitch is doing just that, and it's so natural for her.
Yeah, and you need to, and successfully running a group. I'm a big fan of the the 10,000 hour rule, but it's getting people engaged in the process. Many years ago, there was I was called to a company, and a woman had passed away in a fire, and so they had people on site doing counseling, and discussing it with them, and I guess one of the larger teams got together, and this was the upper management, and the director was there, and just my role is to see is how you're feeling, what's going on. And everybody, when it started off, I was asking people, how you feeling? And everybody was worried about everybody else in their family. I was worried about this person. I was worried about this person. Anyway, I spoke to the I guess the manager or the director, and I said, because he was worried about her family and this and all the other stuff. And I said, but how are you feeling? And he broke down and cried, and it made it that much easier for everybody. And since you pop the bubble, or you go at, I say go at the person, but you engage that person in the discussion, and he opened up, and it created a healthy discussion. He was dealing with a lot of guilt. He said, I'm just happy it's not my family, but I feel so bad because he cared about this person. And so he was dealing with guilt, and a lot of people opened up. And that's one of the things is that's important in having discussions and having a healthy group, is where you can bounce ideas off of things, and people feel okay to open up and call people out or say something, and you can have a discussion. I think that's a healthy thing to do. I'm sorry, go ahead, Andy.
No, I'm sorry. We talked a little bit about how important conversation is, and Colleen said that's why we started this podcast, because we're all starved. We're all starved for adult conversation. But what I think we mean when we say conversation is it's a fancy word, but dialectic. And a dialectic is people having a conversation for a purpose, and that purpose is to decide what the truth is.
But isn't that what the outpatient, isn't it dialectical behavioral therapy or something like that?
Yeah, it is.
Chris, isn't that what, is it?
You know what it is? It's anything and everything. It's family life. It's engaging them in the process, is for them to make changes. It's bringing family into the picture, motivating through, parole. I called the parole officer the other day, and I said, this is about 2 weeks ago, this guy stopped coming or stopped answering my phone calls. And I called the parole officer, and he says, oh, he has COVID. And I said, so we were both discussing, he's going on a run, and then he's going to be in the hospital, and he's going to come out. And so he doesn't get detained, because they're not going to take his urine and know that he's using. And so one of the things is I called the parole officer yesterday or Thursday, and I said to him, I haven't heard from him. He goes, he just talked to me. And I said, well, he's not answering my phone. We checked our phone numbers. I called his home phone, his cell phone, and his other cell phone, and left messages. And then I called parole. I said, tell him he's got to get in touch with me today, because I'm not going to wait for him. And so, getting him out of being stuck in park or doing what he wants to do, that's up to him. That's his decision, where he needs to engage. If you want a better life, or better yet, is you want to live your life, that's fine, but don't try to manipulate me in the process of doing it. If you want help, I'm willing to help you, but don't bullshit me.
Yeah.
And that's oftentimes is kind of, I would say, is what we want,
And that's what we're doing, Andy. Like whether it's what you said, DBT or cognitive behavioral therapy, we're kind of doing that on this podcast, I think.
Of course.
I don't know. I'm asking the expert, but are we
You
doing
know,
that?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
So
you think
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No,
I'm sorry, Colleen.
no.
But you think about this, and I used to say this all the time, and I think it's years back I would say is, I'd say from Philadelphia to past New York City, we're grinders. You say up, I say down. We don't even we're react. And
I thought New Jersey was hoagies.
Philly,
yeah,
right?
no,
Is it?
subs.
Subs. Okay.
Down south it's hoagies or whatever, but we're grinders, and I'm going to be a pain in your ass, right? And I don't mind getting down in the dirt. The expression in Texas, everything's bigger and better in Texas, and one of the things is I always say is New Jersey is I'm from New Jersey, don't fuck with me, because I'm ready to fight, if you will.
Oh,
But it's also like Philadelphia, and it's also like New York. But listen, I went to school in Massachusetts, and I have a lot of guys in Massachusetts. They're very the same way, and I see that spreading out more and more and more across the country, whether it's social media, we just want to argue. And listen, I love arguing as much as the next person, but my arguments, I'm not having as many arguments about Yankees, Red Sox as we used to.
Who can argue with the Yankees right now? I
True.
Come on, baby.
But people will argue about anything. It's just anything and everything. It's just like, but you can't take any ownership of things. So.
Hey, so I was making a list of things to, how do we solve the problem? How do we save the world? So the things that we agree on in this episode, Andy, have you been kind of keeping tally? That's usually normally
I'd be lying if I said I was.
All right. So how do we save the world? Agree or disagree? So, from the most recent, better prepare incoming social workers for what they have to face, or raise tougher kids. I don't know.
How's that even possible? How can you prepare them better? They're already when they get to college, they're already broken.
When they get to college. Yeah. The other thing too is the education. College education's gone down a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a nun where I work, and she does the community outreach, and she works with the poorest of the poor in Hartford. And Hartford's no picnic. It's maybe not Patterson, but it's no picnic.
Oh, it's bad.
And she takes these kids, and she's doing the experiential education. So she's showing them firsthand these Zoomers coming in that are, maybe a little narcissistic, they definitely got trophies just for showing up. Right. And they don't have any resiliency, and she's taking them down there, and some of them can't do it. Some of them just wash out. But I think maybe there's this ironic meaning that could be derived from all this, where the Zoomers going down there are worse off than the people who are living their lives on the street doing drugs and committing crimes. And maybe those criminals will be like, these poor kids, they are so fucking clueless. We must help them. We must toughen them up.
I have a client that said, well, she would always say this is, the streets will take you in. They'll be your family, but they'll
kill you.
And sometimes a little of both. But it's there's a lot of people coming from affluent communities that are hooked on drugs. They come down to Patterson, and then they're tricking and all of the other stuff. Right. It's a reality. It's and you think about this is, I guess one of the best places is to start would be working on yourself and being realistic about your shortcomings and really doing an in-depth search on yourself and figuring out what's important to you. For me, it's just like I said before, what my wife said is, I'm not listening, I'm waiting to talk. I got to take ownership of my bullshit. Listen, hopefully I try to do that.
To your Zoomer conversation, you just triggered something, Chris, and me. I met this young man who was addicted to heroin. He was in a program, and he came from a very, very affluent family in Fairfield County. And so when I met him, I was interviewing him and I'm like, I didn't understand. I'm like, so where was the gap? This is what we worry about as parents. Like, how do we not make the same mistakes their parents made? And he said, no, I had great parents. They were there. Everything I ever needed, they gave me. I had, if I needed a tutor, they got me a tutor, like whatever. And I said, well, why did you start? And he said, well, I started because I was bored. Like it started with, I had this friend and he was breaking into his mom's medicine cabinet. We were taking her painkillers, blah, blah, blah. And then I said, well, heroin, I mean, you're obviously smart enough to not try heroin. Like he actually was going to an Ivy League college and he was arrested while he was in this Ivy League college because he got in a car accident while high on heroin. And I said, so heroin is detrimental. Like, why would you try it? Like, you're obviously smart enough. And he said, you know what? Because I knew growing up, what it really came down to was he felt he was invincible. He tried it one time and he got addicted. And the reason that he tried, this friend that was stealing the mother's, pain meds, said, okay, they were bored. They weren't getting enough of a high off of that anymore. So he said, hey, let's try this. And they said, well, it's me. I'm not going to get addicted to heroin. And sure enough, this kid gets addicted to heroin. And there was this level of nothing goes wrong. I'm invincible. My parents are going to clean up my mess for me, to Andy, to your Zoomer challenge, or Chris, here, everybody gets a trophy. We protect them, we insulate them, and we don't let them fail so they don't believe they ever can. And this was his story. It was really kind of remarkable. I don't think drug addiction, to your point, is
in either case, I think it's the same psychological process. It's a lack of meaning. It's a lack of purpose.
Oh, true.
I feel though that sometimes, regardless of whether they're affluent or not, whoever's helping this person, whether it's family or a loved, like a spouse or something, I think what happens is fear kicks in. And again, you know this better than I do, Chris. It's just what I've seen. And we enable those people. We're terrified for them. So we enable them and we think we're doing right by them. In reality, we're disabling them. You know what I'm saying? Like kids who are late for school, we call the school, oh, they're late. No, let them get the freaking detention. Let them learn the hard way, because, so I do see it as, again, individual responsibility, but I also feel like the loved ones have the best intentions to try to help, but in reality, they're doing more damage.
If humans don't have anything to struggle against, they'll invent things to struggle against.
True.
Right.
Kids don't have grit. It goes back to that old conversation.
Yeah.
Grit.
Well, the other thing too is understanding, and like Al, you said it before, the manipulation aspect is you need to really understand is how somebody will manipulate. And this has happened several times in a group. And I had a client, he since passed away. He was actually another guy who called me in the hospital. But he would always say is, and I've said this story, and so many people identify it with it. He would say is, I would rob from somebody, and then I would help him look for it. Yeah, I'd steal from his wallet, and then I would help him look for it. Wow. And then I'd say, maybe it's this person, maybe it's this person, maybe it's this person. And throughout the years, talking about that, so many people identify with that story. It's like I did that.
That guy's now a senator. But so I'm becoming conscious of the time. We've been going about 90 minutes here on You Can Say That Here. We want to remind everybody to please hit the like, subscribe button. And if you like what you're hearing, if there's things you want to hear, please comment on social media. We do pay attention. So I think that are we at a good point, Colleen, Allie, Chris, you agree?
Yeah.
I want to give Chris the opportunity.
Great. Chris, I loved having you on. This was a great conversation.
But Chris, I want to give you the opportunity, though. We want to give you the opportunity to say, if there's one last thing, you get the last word in today. What would you say to our listener?
I have no idea. I would say is sometimes, they oftentimes say in the rooms is take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth and listen. I think that's a very valid point. And really, when you're talking to people, it's listen and communicate, but it's also surround yourself with people that that you really love. I say this all the time to my clients. I say, give me 3 people that, give you the best advice. Give me 3 people that you really trust, and give me 3 people that you call when you're in jail. It's the same 3 people, but you don't listen to them. I said, why do you trust them, but you're not listening to them? And if we spend a little bit more quality time, the people that are in our lives that mean something to us, we can really learn about ourselves. And that's kind of, our internal growth and just reality. And just we need to look at ourselves and say, I'm a little bit of an asshole at times, and that's a good lesson to learn, past relationships to your present relationships.
Own your shit.
It's insight. Yeah, own your shit. But it's also is the people in your life that you mean that means something to you. Spend the time talking to them, whether it's your parents, because they're not going to be around forever. Another one of my best friends just lost his mom, and it's spending quality time and being supportive of the ones that love you, not just when they win, but also when they're losing and they're down and out. I think that's really important, and that's
Beautiful.
Hopefully it's not a perfect life, but it'll be a much more rewarding life if we do that. I don't say I always do that, but I try.
Damn, you're smart, Chris. We need to spend more time with you guys.
I would say to you, Chris, that I don't know what you believe or don't believe, but I would just say, praying for you as you continue to pour out. I pray you get poured back into, because you don't get depleted and you can continue to pour out, because I do believe God is using you. I think God uses Andy. I think God uses Colleen, me. We all have our different callings. So I would just pray that you would, as you pour out, get poured back into, so that you do have it to give to your family, to your clients, to yourself, so I'll be praying for you, and thank you for your authenticity and for your knowledge and your time. It was greatly appreciated today.
Thank you.
Isn't she just gorgeous? Isn't she just gorgeous? She
really no glasses, no makeup. You should see me when I'm done up and tits out. Let me tell you. Just kidding.
I'm grateful. I'm grateful for the time that we had with you today, Chris, and of course my 2 lovely co-hosts. I want to say 2 things to you. Number 1, you should definitely copyright Moral Malnutrition and write the book.
Yes.
And I don't know if everybody else got it, but I think you're not talking about your clientele, about who's morally malnourished. And the second thing is, that's an incredibly disgusting analogy of taking the cotton out of your ears and putting it in your mouth. And I'm not going to be able to unthink that now.
I loved it. The most quiet person at the table is the loudest. If you think about, speaks the loudest. I love that analogy, but it is nasty. I know. Hey, but Marlon Brando did it. Marlon Brando did it, and he
didn't pull that cotton out of his ears.
Not out of his ears. I forgot. Right. Hey, you got to take tits out. I can't be saying tits.
That's one of the 7 words you can't say on television. But this isn't television. Really? And you can say that here. You can say tits here. Yes.
You can't. Fine. Allie can't say the titty fairy never came to my house.
Just keep saying it. I'm not cutting. I ain't cutting it.
Stop it.
This is going out to the world, 1 listener at a time.
No, you have to take it out.
Yeah. Well, again, thank you very much, Chris, for being with us today. And we wish you the best of luck and Godspeed.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
Take care.